Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about context clues. So, oftentimes when we're reading something that we haven't read before, we come across a lot of vocabulary that we're not very familiar with, and we don't always have access to a dictionary. We don't always have someone to ask what a certain word means, especially if we're taking a test. So, today is all about some strategies that can help you figure out on your own what these words that you might not be familiar with actually mean. So, context clues are hints that the author gives to help define a difficult or unusual or unfamiliar word. The clue may appear within the same sentence as the word it refers to, or it may be in the preceding or the following sentence. It depends on the context. All right. So, there are 5 different types of context clues that I would like you to be familiar with today. And the best way to remember them is to use the acronym IDEAS because ideas refers to inferences, definitions, examples, antonyms, and synonyms. All right, so I need you to remember this ideas. So inferences is basically whenever the writer gives you certain clues to help you infer what the word actually means. Definitions is when the writer chooses to give you a definition, a word for word definition of what the word they just mentioned actually means. And we see this a lot in like science-based texts because not everybody knows all these scientific terms, and so writers tend to give us a short definition of what that word that they just used is. Examples, which is a really good way to put those new vocab words into context and action. So pay attention to those examples that come around that new word that you're not familiar with. Antonyms, which is something that writers also do in order to help you figure out unknown words. And synonyms. So when you see a lot of synonyms around the word, more than likely that word is just meaning something similar to those words. All right, so let's not forget this. Ideas are the 5 different types of context clues that we'll be talking about today. All right, let's dig deeper into inferences. So if we can infer something based on something else, it means we can basically imply something based on something else, right? Let's read this example. You don't want to work with Mark unless you want to hear him talk about himself and achievements all day. He is so arrogant. So obviously arrogant is the word that we might say that this is kind of a difficult word. We maybe haven't heard it before. We're not familiar with what it means. But if you take a closer look at the sentence, you'll realize that everything that came before the word arrogant seems to give us an inference, seems to suggest what the word means, right? So our context clue here is an inference that the writer wrote to help us understand what the word arrogant actually means, right? Because it says here, unless you want to hear him talk about himself and his achievements all day long, which helps us infer that an arrogant person loves to talk about himself or herself. All right, the second type of context clue is a definition. So the writer can give you a definition. Let's look at this example. Mark is so arrogant, he thinks he is better than everyone else. All right, so the writer basically defined what arrogant actually means here. They just told you an arrogant person in the following sentence is someone who thinks that they're better than everyone else. They gave you a definition. All right, an example is another way we can use context clues. So let's look at this sentence. Mark is so arrogant. For instance, he is always bragging about how great he is at sports. This sentence gave you an example of how he's arrogant. And from looking at the word brag, you can infer or you can tell that, oh, they gave you an example of what arrogance looks like in this person. So that is how we use examples to understand new vocabulary. And then antonyms, Mark is so arrogant. He needs to learn how to be humble like his younger brother, Jose. So a contrast between Mark and Jose helped us understand what arrogant means because we know what humble means and we know that his brother is humble. And if they're unlike each other, right, they're the opposites, that kind of helped us understand that Mark is not very humble, right? He's kind of showy. So we used an antonym clue here because the word arrogant is antonyms with the word humble. And that's how we found out what the word arrogant actually means. Okay, and we can also use synonyms. Mark is so arrogant, proud, self-centered, and overbearing. We know what proud, self-centered, and overbearing means. We know that all these words mean that you're just full of yourself and you're not very humble and you're not very down to earth. And so because of the way the sentence is worded, all these are just synonyms for the same word, arrogant. And so now we found out what the word arrogant actually means using our context clue synonyms. Alrighty. There is one more thing that we can actually use or do in order to figure out what words mean or what unfamiliar vocabulary is. This is by using morphology. This is not necessarily a context clue technique. This is more of a morphology technique because we've been working a lot on morphology. In class, we have a morphology wall with a lot of morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of a word that actually has meaning. So we have been working on prefixes, suffixes, and a lot of root words, right? And let's try to review some of these. So we know that struct is a root word that actually means to build, right? And we know that trans means across. So let's take a look at how many words we can generate by adding prefixes and suffixes to these root words. So in the word trans, which means across, if we say transcontinental, we know what a continent is, and we know that trans means across. So transcontinental means across countries. Translate means to turn one language to the other. Transform means to change one form or to take one form across and make it something else. Transfer means to take something from one place to the other. Transatlantic means to go across the Atlantic Ocean. Transport, we know that port means to carry. So if something is being transported, it's being carried across borders or across states or from one area to the other. So technically here, I did not have a context. I didn't have a paragraph or a sentence that I relied on to search for those context clues. I just looked deeper into the word to find out what the word actually means. I relied on my morphology knowledge. So if we look at the picture to the left, we have the root or the stem word struct, which means to build. And we know that re means again, d means to go down or below. We know that the suffix shen makes the word into a noun. We know that the suffix iv makes the word into an adjective. Nest makes the word into a noun. So let's take a look at one of these, for example. If we said deconstructive or deconstruction, that may seem like a very long word that we're not very familiar with, but if we break it down, we'd be able to realize, wait, struct means to build. Deconstruct means to tear down because de means to go down. Shin makes the word into a noun. So deconstruction is the process of tearing something down. It's basically a noun because it has shin. It refers to the method or the process of something being torn down, right? So constructive, if I say that was a very constructive talk, we know that struct means to build and if makes the word into an adjective and kin means together. So constructive is the process of building on something or making something be positive and helpful and move in the right direction. So yeah, constructively, now the word is an adverb, but if something is done in a constructively manner, it basically done in a manner which was helpful and constructive. Again, I didn't have a context here. I just relied on my morphology tools. So just keep that in mind that you can always look at the word closer and try to see if you know any of the prefixes, roots, or suffixes in order to help you define what the word actually means. All right, let's take a look at this example. Even though there were so many transportation methods available, the tourists preferred walking up the mountains to enjoy the beautiful scenery. That's a really good sentence. And yes, we can definitely use the context clue here that's an antonym because we had even though, which suggests a contrast, and we had either transportation, but they preferred to go walking. So we can infer here that walking is the opposite of the transportation. So being on feet is the opposite of riding a car or a bus or taking an airplane or a helicopter. But something else we could do is, like I told you earlier, we could take a look at the morphology components here. So we can say that trans means across, port means to carry, and shen makes the word into a noun. So transportation makes it if we look closer at this word based on the morphemes that we have, it means the process or the method of carrying things across from area to area, carrying people or goods or whatever from one area to another. So it's all the means that we use for actually moving around or moving things around. Alrighty. And we have a text that we're going to read called Abby's New School. Abby's New School is a short, very short story. I believe it's a personal narrative about a girl who has moved to a new school, and her friends are pondering whether or not they should try to talk to her and make her feel welcome. I need you to do one thing as we go through this. I need you to try to look at the new vocabulary and try to look around them to try to see if there's any context clues that we can use to understand what these new unfamiliar words actually mean. So Abby's New School, context clues and multiple meaning words. Some people, this is part one, some people can jump into a group of strangers and feel totally comfortable, but I am definitely not one of those extroverted people. Now, we may not know what extroverted means, but based on looking at this, we know that it's describing the word people, so it's an adjective. We know that the ex, which is the prefix, makes the word mean something that has to do with being out, right? We know X means out. So if you're extroverted, you like to talk out with people and hang out and socialize. Whereas if you're introverted, you like to keep to yourself. So that's already two clues that we know. And if we read the sentence, it says, some people can do this, but I'm not that kind of person. So some people are all out and about socializing. They're comfortable walking up to strangers and talking to them. I'm not like that, which suggests that the word extroverted means social. right? People who like to go out and social and do that. But I'm not one of those extroverted people. For example, I remember being at a friend's party when I didn't know anyone. I felt so apprehensive. I would have given anything for an invisibility cap. Here, our context clue for the word apprehensive is an invisibility cap, right? So if you want to hide away from the world, does that suggest that you're nervous? Yeah. It suggests that you're very shy, you're uncomfortable about being out and mingling with people, and you just want to hide away and hide in your invisibility cape. So with that being said, we can infer that the word apprehensive means nervous, shy, right? So if you feel so apprehensive about something, you feel nervous, you don't really want to go out there and talk to people and do all those things. And I'm sure that's exactly the way Abby felt when she joined my class this fall. Abby just moved here from a small town in the mountains, our teacher announced. I know you'll all help her feel comfortable. That day at lunch, I saw Abby sitting alone, so I asked my friend, don't you think we should invite the new girl to sit at our table? No, not a good idea. I think she's an aloof person, said Noah. Okay, so we don't know what aloof means, but we're going to try to figure it out. I told her a knock knock joke and she hardly cracked a smile. Okay, this is our clue right here. So if you talk to someone and you told them a joke, you're trying to make them laugh, but they just didn't even smile. Does that suggest that they're social, they like to talk and laugh and do things with others, or does that suggest that they're just kind of distant and they like to keep to themselves? There you go. So basically, we infer by reading the rest of the sentence that the word aloof means someone who is a little distant and likes to keep to themselves. They're not very social. Miguel patted Noah on the back. Dude, that doesn't mean she doesn't like people. Nobody cracks a smile at your jokes. Ha ha, funny, said Noah with a smirk. Olivia shrugged. If she wanted to sit with us, she could just come over. I disagree, said Maria. I think it's next to impossible to march over to a bunch of people you don't know and sit down. Before we knew it, the lunch hour was up and we hadn't said anything to Abby. All right, so we're going to stop here and we're just going to review real quick. We didn't know what the word extroverted mean, right? But based on reading this, we were able to find out that it's a contrasting point. She said that some people can walk up to a group of strangers and feel comfortable, but I'm not. That's definitely not me. I'm not one of those extroverted people, which helped us understand what extroverted means. People who are social and like to mingle with others. And then as we kept reading, we saw the word apprehensive that we may have not have heard before, but based on the context clues that we were given, right, the invisibility cape that was mentioned here, we were able to understand that apprehensive means nervous or having sort of cold feet, being a little jittery. And then as we kept reading, we saw the word aloof. So when Noah gave her that joke, she didn't even crack a smile. She was just out and sitting by herself and didn't even laugh, which suggests that she likes to keep to herself and doesn't want to engage with others, right? She's kind of an alone person, which is another way we guessed what a new vocab word means. So the next time you have to take a test or read something that you're not familiar with and you come across some new vocabulary, I don't want you to give up and just shut down. I need you to try to look closer into the context, look for those clues, whether it's your synonyms, antonyms, morphology, whether it's inferences or certain cues and clues that the writer gave you, definitions, examples. Look deeper into the text and try to read carefully to find what these words mean. Sometimes it's just a matter of logic, using your logic, looking closer in order to understand what new words mean. Okay, and I know you can do it. You just have to try. All right. I hope you enjoyed our presentation about context clues, and I will see you again next time. Thank you very much.